dear Bagginses and Boffins.
Galadriel's world is a raging sea far from the wise, ethereal elven queen that Cate Blanchett brought to Peter Jackson's acclaimed films. You know, the one that was way more accurate to the actual Galadriel. The Galadriel played by Morfydd Clark in Amazon's upcoming series, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, is thousands of years younger, as angry and brash as she is clever and certain that evil is looming closer than anyone realizes. I completely agree with that, and its name is Amazon, owned by Jeff Bezos. So we're just going to take some pieces out of this very long article, but it does indeed confirm and deny a couple of our concerns. But I'll just say up front about the inclusivity and diversity that's going to be used against us, weaponized against fans who just want the people who are adapting J.R.R. Tolkien's work to be, as Tom Shippey says, as Tolkienian as possible, to respect the lore. But instead, we're going to be racist and white supremacists by saying, hey, this doesn't look like the thing that we love, the thing that we made a billion-dollar franchise. Before we go down this very...
Do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Sure.
So yeah, the one thing, I do think he mentions it here at some point in this video, and we're gonna have to cut this into parts because this is already taken forever. But Tom Shippey is no longer a part of this team.
Yes.
So he was originally brought on to make sure that they followed the lore, and there was some disagreement. We're not really sure what about, but he was since let go, and so I think that is a big story that is kind of riling up the fans, knowing that someone who potentially was advocating on their behalf is no longer a part of the project.
Yeah.
So I kind of agree with that. Like I don't, even if you have disagreements, I don't think people need to be let go unless there was some, like, unless he had a hard line and was essentially like, either you do this the way I'm saying or I'm out of here or something like that. Unless there was that hard line, I really don't see why you need to let people go that have simple disagreements, because I think that's healthy. I think that would keep people on their toes and thinking up how to solve certain problems that are pleasing to all the groups in the room, all the people that are providing input. So I'm sympathetic to that. In terms of the fans being called racist, it is unfortunate that's going to happen, but it's also unfortunate that there are going to be racists in that group. And so this one is a bit harder to parse, because this is a sentiment I've heard from some other Lord of the Rings people on both TikTok and YouTube, which is that the big problem is the groups that are the people that are advocating for a more Tolkien-esque casting, they are providing shelter to actual racists, because they're in agreement in terms of who should be playing certain characters. And so it is a tough one to go down. Because I understand where people are coming from in terms of wanting it to be completely book and Tolkien accurate, but as we've mentioned before, and as I'm sure anyone watching this who has seen the originals and has read the books knows, there are massive changes, not to actors' races, but in terms of their appearance. There are massive changes between the books and the films. And so the question kind of becomes, how much of it can you get away with until it becomes lore and potentially movie breaking, in terms of you can no longer suspend your disbelief based on your knowledge of the world that you are watching on screen. And so that's going to be the hard line to walk for the writers, especially if you're going to be introducing a bit of a multicultural cast for all factions and all fantasy races within Middle Earth.
Yes.
You are going to run into this problem where people who have certain expectations of the world when they want to watch these movies. They're getting into it, and they are suspending their disbelief to watch a fantasy epic. But that only goes so much until you start putting in things that don't work. Just real quick, for me, in The Hobbit, putting in those mountain giants that are literally rock titans, to me is world breaking. I cannot watch that and go, okay, this works, like this makes sense. To me, I have to just completely pass that scene by and almost imagine that they got like they miss
They were hallucinating.
they were hallucinating, or because there was so much lightning and thunder, they thought they saw this, but it was really just rocks, like a landslide or something. Because I cannot watch that scene as it is in the movie and continue believing that those are things that exist in the world. I just can't. So I do appreciate fans who have a similar problem. Maybe this is a problem. Maybe it's an OCD problem, but it's something that when you're watching a movie and that happens, maybe one or two times you're able to overcome it and say, those random one-off scenes, I can maybe come up with some ad hoc explanation for what I feel those characters should have been doing in those scenes. But if you're doing it through the entire series, eventually people are going to just get bored and tune out, because they don't even feel like they're actually watching a Middle Earth. They almost feel like they're watching people pretending to be in Middle Earth, if that makes sense. Even though it is all pretend, it's a movie, but you are trying to immerse yourself in it in those moments. And so I completely appreciate the fans wanting to feel more immersive in these shows, but at the same time, they have to understand that they are providing cover for actual racists who are simply mad at the color of people's skin. And I think it's important, especially for people like Nerdrotic. I think they do need to call that out when it happens. If people have true criticisms, and I think Nerdrotic, I think this video he's actually pretty toned down, and I think he levies some good criticisms without going too far. But I would appreciate people like him pointing that out and calling it out when they see it within their group. I think that's fair. Yeah.
And I mean, it'll come down to how they do it too. Like,
that's right.
Having a few people of color here and there, I mean, that was probably always the case anywhere, because people move around. But I mean, if you go to like kind of the southern parts of Middle Earth, like Harad and all that, people are going to have darker tones.
Exactly.
And then further north, you're going to have more people with lighter tones. I mean, if they ratio it out, you know, you're going to maybe see some diversity throughout. Yeah.
No, it's exactly right. And so I think it works for the most part in certain aspects. In terms of, I think if we just play his thing out a little bit more, he's going to be talking about the dwarf princess. I'm not sure if he's referencing her specifically, although when he does say tokenized Tolkien, he does display her picture. And I find that dwarves, there is going to be a huge spectrum of dwarves based on where they're from. There are mountain ranges all over the place, after all. So for me, the dwarf multicultural aspect isn't a big problem. I think where people get really bogged down are with the hobbits, because they're so localized. There are only hobbits near the Shire, as well as the elves, which I think we're gonna get to eventually. Actually, we're gonna wrap this one up, and we're gonna keep it going in the next one. So anything last little bit to say about this?
Nope.
All right. Well, guys, subscribe and follow us for our next one. We're gonna go through this entire video here, because I think Nerdrotic does sum up the frustration for many fans, and so I think it's helpful to see what he has to say and respond or agree. As you've seen, I've been agreeing with some of it.
I regret to announce this is the end. I bid you all a very fond farewell.